Molly Grue. I hate introductions. Yes, I realize this is an odd place to make a statement along these lines. For this to make sense, I should probably give a little background. Growing up, I lived out in the country. It wasn't especially rustic, and I'm not trying to imply any hardship. It's just that I didn't grow up in a suburb, surrounded by a bunch of other kids to play with or places to go. Instead, I grew up with books. It's hard to look back in time and try to calculate exactly how much I read. But it was a lot. I remember rereading my mother's big red hardcover copy of The Lord of the Rings every summer, laying on my bed. I remember packing up for school before getting on the long bus ride in the 5th grade. I always made sure I had 2 paperbacks in my backpack. They weren't the book I was reading. That book was always in my hand or my coat pocket. The books in my backpack were for when I finished that one. That way, I always had a backup, and then a spare after that. I might forget to take my lunch to school, but I never forgot to take books. Interestingly, I never read The Last Unicorn in all that time. I know this because when I watched the animated movie with my mother and grandmother, it was completely new to me. This trend continued through high school. I read at lunch. I read when my mom took us to the beach. Did you know that there is a limit to the number of books you can check out from the library? There is. My allowance was mostly spent on books, and I packed a duffel bag of paperbacks for family vacations. Most of these books were fantasy, and most of them were what my mother would have called popcorn books, which meant they were fun, but not really substantial, delightful, delicious, garbage books full of elves and magic swords. At a rough estimate, I'm guessing I must have read at least 2,000 or 3,000 novels before I left for college. I'll mention here, so you know where I'm going with this, that I can't remember a single one of these books ever having an introduction. At college, I discovered kissing and the humanities. As a result, by the end of my first year, I had abandoned my chemical engineering degree and my habit of reading a book or two every day. It was at this time that I stumbled across a copy of The Lord of the Rings that included an introduction written by someone named Peter S. Beagle. It's the first introduction I remember encountering, let alone reading. I was filled with an odd indignation. Who the hell does this guy think he is? I wondered with all the arrogance of a 20-year-old. Why would you need to write an introduction to the best fantasy books of all time? Despite this, I read the introduction, and it was oddly comforting to me. I'd been taught that fantasy was low class, a waste of time. But Peter spoke in glowing terms of Tolkien and Middle-earth, saying, "We are raised to honor all the wrong explorers and discoverers, thieves planting flags, murderers carrying crosses. Let us at last praise the colonizers of dreams." Forgive me if I pass lightly by the word colonizers here, which back then didn't have the well-deserved negative connotation it does today. The reason I remember this so clearly is that this was one of the first times I'd ever seen anyone defending fantasy as something beautiful and worthwhile. This is when I started to realize that maybe I didn't need to feel bad about liking fantasy. Maybe it didn't need to be a guilty pleasure. I tracked down this Beagle guy's unicorn book and was impressed by the language and how different it was from a lot of the other stuff I'd read. It wasn't all about armies fighting and magic swords and quests. How strange. How wondrous strange. Though I wasn't reading a book a day anymore, I still read constantly. It was a rare semester where I wasn't taking at least one class where the focus wasn't on reading something. Novels, plays, poetry, philosophical and religious texts. Afterward, I would discuss what I'd read with professors, classmates, and friends. This went on